Welcome to the Sales Scholars, where we talk to academic experts about anything and everything sales related. Our goal is to bring some of the top academic research in the world of selling and deliver it here to you in practical, easy to apply methods that can improve your business. Well, welcome to the Sales Scholars podcast. This show, we are excited to welcome Dr. Valerie McGehee from the University of Louisiana at Lafayette. So Dr. McGehee has done a lot of great research on some topics that I know are super valuable to both sales leaders and salespeople. So Valerie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Craig. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Oh no, we're glad to have you. I know when we first talked and we were talking about some of the work you do, I was certainly impressed by the topics. I know that in this day and age, when it comes to some of the things we're going to talk about today, I mean, sales leaders need to know what's happening in the academic world, so then they can determine, hey, how do I bring this to life in my own organization?
Yeah. There's so much that we can talk about regarding sales, and especially with the times changing with COVID and going virtual. It's a whole nother aspect of how we're doing business and customer relationships. And it's very interesting, and especially as an academic, there's lots to talk about.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love that. It's an interesting time. So, well, look, I always like to start off the show by getting a little bit of background on our guests. So maybe tell us a little bit about how in the world did you get into the academic space?
Yeah, so my undergraduate degree is in education. So I was an elementary teacher for 10 years. Um, as much as it was cute teaching little guys, I would adjunct in the evenings at the local state university where I was living at the time in New Jersey. I realized that going from teaching students during little guys during the day to teaching the big guys in the evening, that was my niche, and I preferred teaching adult students. So after discussions with my mentor, it was recommended that I would go for my PhD. So while I was doing all that and the 10 years of being an elementary teacher, I decided to start my own company. So I started a swimwear company, and I did that for about 5 years. It was just a passion project that turned into something real. That could be a whole nother episode of that experience, but it was really neat. I even did the Emmy gifting suites and the Oscar gifting suites and the Miss USA pageant. So that was definitely a fun experience, and I wore many hats in that role of being a business owner, which will lead to my experience in academia where I'm at now. I wanted to continue with the business, but kind of at the same time I was leaving the elementary school phase as a teacher. I ended up selling my company to an offer I couldn't refuse, and I got a job working at Franklin Covey doing sales for their education division for New Jersey. So I worked there for about 4 years until the opportunity came to leave New Jersey. I was getting married. My husband's from Lafayette, and we decided to move to Louisiana. So I had to change jobs again, but I had the skill of being a business owner and the skill of doing sales for a big corporate company. So I worked at a company here in Lafayette for a few months before I started the job here at the university. And so with my PhD in hand, I started my first official full-time job in academia.
Okay. What an interesting path. So your own company to working for a company, then into the academic space. That's a great experience. I know when I reflect back on my own time when I had my own company, for me, it was the point in time where I learned a whole lot in a really short period of time. Because like you said, you have to know how to do
Yeah.
all of the things, because you do initially,
Yeah.
you wear all the hats.
Right. And you have no choice. You have to figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What a great experience. So that must have been between that and then selling for a bigger company just to help with your transition into the academic sales world.
Right. And Franklin Covey, like um the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and they're an international company. The culture of Franklin Covey is so family oriented, and they talk their whole theme is personal development and professional development. So I was just so fortunate to work for them, and I still have relationships with some of the my bosses and the employees there. They actually help. They actually come in and guest speak to my sales courses still. So that's
Oh
pretty
man, I
cool.
bet the students love that.
They do, especially when you have like Josh Cuddy, as like a surprise guest speaker, or it's pretty neat.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Well, I know that you tackle some great topics in your research. I know when we had an early conversation, we were talking about a number of different things, and one of them in particular is your work that you've done around coaching specifically.
Hmm.
And if you look at the changing landscape of sales, and especially therefore sales leadership,
Yeah.
you could argue that this capability of coaching is more important than ever. So
Right.
maybe share a little bit about the research work you did, kind of what you learned, and then ultimately kind of how should companies be thinking about this topic of coaching?
Yeah. So a lot of my work was based on virtual international sales coaching. Um, and I could talk about those specific themes. But what I found was that different tools and outcomes that make a good, successful sales coach. Um, and those are things that, like, some of them I knew before, but a lot of them brought new light to um, what the meaning of coaching really is. Because you could be a sales manager, but not every sales manager could be a good sales coach, and vice versa. So a good sales manager is also a good sales coach. We kind of combine the two roles into one. We see as great sales coaching. Those are people that they hold their sales reps accountable. They provide clear direction. Um, they can explain really well. I always use the phrase to my students: you need to be able to diagnose before you prescribe, seek first to understand, then to be understood, and really be a good listener. Good sales coaches provide value. They provide something that the sales reps can learn from, and they're patient. And with going virtual, there's been a huge change. It's actually allowed sales coaches to be better sales coaches, because there's things that they can do that they weren't able to do before. For example, um, they could jump on a virtual Zoom call with the sales rep and their client, and they could just be on mute and not with their camera on, and they could take notes, they can listen, and then they can provide much better feedback to the sales rep. um, when you're live, you can't do that, because if you're
Yeah.
a sales coach or sales manager and you're going into the meetings with your reps, you can't really take notes and really analyze the situation. But you could kind of like sit back and watch this all happen and be a much better sales coach when they're off the call.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
No, that what a as you're talking about kind of that changing perspective of virtual.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've noticed it myself in interactions with clients where you can bring somebody on to listen. It's easier to be a passive observer in the virtual world.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe just observer is the better term, but in the virtual world, than it is in the real world when you sit at the table particularly if your goal is to coach.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And so my research is um, is more geared towards those coaching international clients and international teams. There's 4 areas that we're trying to look at, like the psychology behind that, and like what makes a good international virtual coach. And so with that, there's 4 areas. So we refer to them as cognitive, metacognitive, motivational, and behavioral. And so if you can fit those categories, then you can be a much better international coach. And I'm doing this virtually, but also in person. If you're, times are different and you're over there, flying to different places, you're able to be in person. But there's um, there's things with each theme that make a difference. So, for example, um, having like a cognitive approach to your training means that like you're just that's like the base. You just know that there's a cultural difference. Having a metacognitive mindset is knowing that that there is a difference and you recognize the cultural differences. Having a motivational mindset is being open to other people's cultures, and having a behavioral mindset or a behavioral approach is actually making the changes so that you fit the culture's communication style. So that could be
Okay.
a greeting, it's you're greeting them in the way that they speak or in their style. So those four behavioral approaches are really important for a sales coach to be aware of and to be mindful of, because if they can make that change, then they can adapt and they could fit in more, and then they're trusted, because you have to trust the person that you're being coached by.
Yeah. It's funny that you use that word trust. It's like no matter where you are in the world and what you're doing, it sounds like a lot of times it starts with trust, like your ability to engage and influence and be part of what somebody else is doing. That seems to be at the heart of it.
I mean, and I would say that's like sales 101. Your client or your customer needs to trust you, and that's what you build your relationship on in order for them to continue buying from you or to form that relationship.
Yeah. One of the things I'm curious as you talk about the kind of the four attributes of international coaching and effectiveness in coaching, Valerie, is what are your thoughts on that just as a model, kind of applying to thinking just in general coaching, in terms of okay, I know there are differences between us. Now I actually have figured out the differences
Yeah.
and I'm willing to make some changes and I do make some changes. Like, do you think that's applicable in any type of coaching interaction?
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because that's the approach that we start to take during our interviews of people for this research. Is okay. Well, what about domestic coaching, and do these four criterias fit? And so what we heard from some people is, yeah, you know if I'm virtually coaching and everyone is at home, their husband, their wife, their children are now being homeschooled. Um, there's kids running in the background. You have to, one, the cognitive part is know that this is happening. Metacognitive is this. Are you willing to continue the conversation, right? Up to behavioral. Okay, so it's acknowledging it. Hey, is there a time that you want to speak? Where is this a good time? Just like acknowledging it. If they have to take a break because their child is coming in and wants to sit on their lap, do you go along with it? Do you accept it? So changes like that. But even, for example, territory managers who have like 5 different states, right? So let's say you're a territory manager, you're living in New Jersey, but you're managing Louisiana and Florida and Alabama, right? Major cultural differences for sure. I know that from personal experience.
I was about to say, I feel like you've got some personal experience in the New Jersey versus Louisiana for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. And so there's different sayings. There's different things mean different. For example, I would say in Louisiana, family is very important to people down here. Being together, celebrating for whatever reason. And I don't know if you know this, but schools are off the week of Mardi Gras down here. Like there's no school the week of Mardi Gras.
I did not know that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's new for me. New Jersey, we don't even talk about Mardi Gras. so, um, so things like that. Celebrating Mardi Gras. Okay, so you're not working on Mardi Gras. That's normal for down here. So you have to be aware of that. And so if you're able to make those changes and adjust your style, um, you know, it's knowing domestically, if someone has children at home, if someone is celebrating a holiday, being able um, to be open-minded and adapt.
Yeah. It's so funny. It comes back to those things of open-mindedness and adaptability, but again, applicable to the sales world,
Hmm.
particularly if you're, trying to discover and learn, hey, what's really important to your customer,
Yeah.
and then being prepared to adjust. So one of the things I'm wondering about, just like from a best practice standpoint or most effective coaches, like were there any things that you found in any of your research that pointed to, hey, look, if you're going to be effective at coaching, aside from this kind of 4-part model, were there any like
Mhm.
best practices that good effective coaches applied?
Yeah. So we asked people if they could rank in importance, level from like 1 to 10. What's more important, cognitive or behavioral, or metacognitive? And so they struggled with that. But what we found out was people that actually took the time to study, research, and understand their clients and where they're coming from. So if it's international, understanding what the culture is, what the common communication styles are, taking the time to do that um, was super important for international coaching. Like, for example, we interviewed a woman who was in the Emirates, United Emirates, and it was her, a female, with 5 gentlemen, and uh, they want somebody wanted to take a picture, and so she knew she couldn't put her arm around somebody because she was a very sociable person, but she knew she just had to stand straight and not too close to one of the males for the photo, because that would have been inappropriate. And especially with gender differences, that's a huge issue to be aware of about those social norms. So definitely doing your research, but you can be aware of these social norms, but not do anything about it. So if you can practice the social norms, you'll gain a lot more trust. Um, Another example I could think of was somebody we interviewed. Um, she went from having a call with her clients in China, and on the same call were her clients from Brazil. Two completely separate cultures. One, high and low dominance, right? And so she had to find a middle ground where her Brazilian clients were, with their hellos, oh hi, how are things going, and how's the family, and her Chinese clients were very to themselves and didn't share much about their personal lives. And so the introductions, when they were doing the introductions, she couldn't push too much with certain people, but unless they wanted to share more information. And so she had to adjust her style of communicating on the same call with these people from 2 different countries.
Interesting. Yeah, and I think clearly it sounds like that, it highlights this idea of, understanding what the differences are, being willing to change,
Yes.
which is funny. I think that the when I talk to people about coaching, a lot of times they have in their mind like the athletic coach,
Yeah.
and the athletic coach doesn't necessarily try to do any of those things. In fact, the athletic coach more kind of barks what to do and how to do it. And next time,
Right.
try this. And it sounds like that when it comes to sales coaching,
Mhm.
that is not the right path to take. Is that fair to say?
I would, yeah, I would agree, because I would say like a sports coach, you know, is kind of like the manager, where they organize, they plan, they direct. A sales coach is a combination of them, but it's more of the leader, and they also are a role model, and so they show you. They should be able to model behaviors or practices and show you how to if it's sales, show you how to sell and give you examples, and more so just be a motivator, and be patient and encouraging.
Yeah. No, that's really good. I'm wondering, Valerie, if in any of your research or any of the folks you talked to, did you get any clear value on, like, here's why coaching matters, like anything in terms of establishing the real value of it and the impact of people and businesses?
Uh, yeah, and we found that establishing long-lasting relationships was extremely valuable personally to these people, but also, for the company's sake. Um, and if you have, I would say, not everyone can be a sales coach, and it takes a certain person to do that. And I've come across every international sales coach that I spoke to is a very compassionate, empathetic individual, very eloquent. uh, they're good listeners, and so um, having that skill set is unique. And um, that's what I found with these sales coaches, with these international sales coaches.
Yeah. I like the descriptor of some of the attributes. And it sounds like to the degree people realize that, it's, hey, look, if you're not a highly empathetic person, which happens, then
Mhm.
the idea of being effective at coaching might be a bigger challenge.
Yeah,
But it certainly helps to kind of paint this picture on what it takes to be a good coach. And
right.
I like how you talked about the changing world of virtual and the impact on it. I know one of the things that we certainly in the academic space have had to do is make this kind of swing to virtual. Business practitioners are out there making the swing to virtual, and more trying to, certainly use coaching, but then also kind of use some of these experiential type of engagements or learning. I know you and I had talked the first time when we were talking about the podcast around this idea of experiential learning and some of the unique work that you're doing both with your students, but things that I think could translate into helping organizations just become more effective. So maybe if you share a little bit about that, what you've been learning and what you've been doing, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I started with my one course. It's called Professional Sales, and it's kind of, if you could think of everything you need to learn in sales and marketing, that's what this course teaches. So, like, okay, how do I actually get the students to really understand everything that I'm teaching them? So I thought, hey, wouldn't this be a great idea to do experiential learning projects? So I came across this company called Ripen, RIIPEN, and they're kind of like a matchmaker for universities and companies, that students can work on projects for these companies. And so we ended up getting matched with about 15 companies, give or take, and which I found out that usually a professor does one company a semester. Like, wow, you're doing 15. I'm like, yeah. So we have groups of students. So it's been very, very time consuming, but and a lot of organization on my part. But
I love how you
uh,
found that out after you had the 15, right?
yeah,
You're like, oh, I thought just this was normal. It's not. Oh, okay.
yeah. Oh no. So so now the students are meeting with their companies outside of class. Usually they meet with them for like an hour a week, but then they meet with each other in groups, and and the company has given them a marketing and sales project to work on. So they are taking a very deep dive into learning sales and marketing as they're given these tasks. There's something that they don't know how to do because they have taken other classes before in sales and marketing. So some of them have a background, some of them have worked or have done internships, so some of them have an idea. But my job is to provide them with any skills and teach them whatever they don't know. So, for example, if a company needs help with their digital marketing, we'll talk about ways they can market on LinkedIn or use, different types of apps like Planoly to plan Instagram posts. So giving the students tools on how to get leads and how to do various types of marketing. They're learning this at the same time I'm teaching it, so they can really get a much better understanding. And some of the groups, like one of them is working for a nonprofit, a local nonprofit, which was like someone that came to me asking, "Hey, I heard you're doing these experiential learning projects. Can I be part of that?" And it's called Adopt a Storm Drain, and it's a nonprofit. Actually, our assistant dean asked if she could help mentor the students, and so it's something that's turned into something much bigger and will help the community because down here in Louisiana we have issues with the storm drains and they always need to be cleared off. So you
Yeah.
basically can adopt a storm drain. Another project we're working with is for a NASCAR driver named Michel Distier. And so he's actually the only Frenchman who is driving a NASCAR. It's kind of like the Talladega Nights scenario,
Okay.
but he's a real person.
You're bringing it to life. The movie comes to
Yeah,
life.
yeah. And so I have students working on that project. So they've actually been tasked to do his entire US sales and marketing for his NASCAR racing season this year. It's a great learning experience, a huge learning curve.
Yeah. Well, big learning curve, but I would think, like you said, are you finding that both the students are learning faster than they normally would, and then the companies are getting value out of the interaction?
Yeah, and so the students are also learning job skills because they have to like report to basically a boss, right? We're a manager, show up to the meetings on time, get the task done. So this is a great way, even if you're not doing it through like a formal method, like I'm using this website or using doing this in class. This is a great way for companies to get some extra help.
If I'm a company owner, I'm running a business. I mean, what would be your suggestion to me on how to get some experiential learning going with a resource?
Yeah, so if you can reach out to your local university, if there's anyone interested in a type of internship, you could give the students any type of project that you think that a beginner would be able to do. You give them a timeline. You have to make the project very clear. You have to kind of break it down into some type of bullet point so that they understand because a lot of times they're afraid to ask questions. They don't know what they don't know, and if and you may have to repeat yourself a bunch of times, but be patient with them.
Sounds
And
like a professor.
yeah,
You know, we have to repeat ourselves a few times.
right. So, but I would totally, if I was a business, I mean, if I still had my own business, I would totally do this. It's great experience for the students, and in return, the companies get stuff done.
Oh man, what a great experience. I'm like you in that I think, oh my gosh, I never could have done these things as a student
Yeah,
so many years ago. And I, didn't have the opportunity, but I know a lot of organizations, I mean, they're hiring people out of school in many
yeah,
cases, or they're developing teams that even with a team of new hires that I feel like things like these experiential type of opportunities. They
hmm,
just help, they accelerate learning, they get people immersed in a
yeah,
project. So you're not just learning, but you're doing it while you learn, which accelerates the
right,
learning process. So I love it. I love
yeah.
what you're doing. Well, Valerie, we're out at the end of the show.
Mhm.
So this has been a great conversation. Clearly, the work you're doing at the university is innovative. I love to hear it. So I'm sure our listeners will love the episode. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed it.